Hey everyone, welcome to the PlexTrac mini-series. This episode will feature a full demo of the PlexTrac product. It's a really cool and awesome walkthrough the PlexTrac capabilities and features. If you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrac series. Welcome everyone to today's demo of PlexTrac. Very excited for this kind of a guided demo where some of my good friends from PlexTrac will walk us through the product, which I pretty much endorsed since day one. You know, I think when Dan first presented this to me, I'm like, every pen tester should be using this. That may even still be on their website today, and I genuinely mean that, it's really cool. And it's a great product, and I'm excited to have the fine folks from PlexTrac walk us through it today. Dan DeCloss is the CEO and founder of PlexTrac. Dan, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Excited to be here.
Yes, nice to have you. Sean Scott, the VP of Success. I think that's your title that's on the website. I can't keep everyone's title straight. Is that your title?
That is a real title, Paul. I still don't know what it means.
Yeah, there you go. You keep everyone happy. That's the like customer success. You keep everyone happy, Sean.
I try. I fail, but I try.
That's it. That's a hard job. It's a tall order, right? All righty. So let's dig into it. I'm going to kind of guide this demo and ask questions drawing on my experience being both a penetration tester and working on the defensive side as well. So I'm super excited. I think we want to start with where you would bring results in, right? Because, I mean, this journey kind of really starts like once I've got some results from a tool or some kind of assessment. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And PlexTrac is a great tool for bringing in all sorts of reports. We talked about pen testing, and that is where we started, and that really is our bread and butter from a perspective of who our current client base is and who we love working with and get our best ideas from. But we've really grown as a platform as a way of being able to ingest lots of different types of data. So it doesn't matter if you're a pen tester or you're in the GRC space, or if you're just doing vulnerability management. PlexTrac is a great way to ingest all those different findings and bring them into a single place. So in PlexTrac, we really want to focus on getting the work done. So generally, when people come into the platform, they're going to start out by working within the construct of a client. Now, the term client, it's really just an agnostic term for an overall grouping of reports. It's the place where we assign permissions and allow you to determine who does and does not have access to data. So for today's purposes, we'll just create a new client for you, Paul. We'll create PSW client, and we'll get rolling. We give you the option of entering a whole lot of data that you can then draw upon later, such as point of contact, email, description, things like that, and also tags as well. We'll talk a little bit more about tags as we progress in the demo.
Yeah, and I really like this just because I've built a similar application for a completely different use case, but what it allows you to do is centralize a lot of that data, right? Like you had some other fields about there. You could store some data about the client, who's the point of contact. And I often find it's like we go through this journey, right? I think there's going to be lots of data points where these could exist in email, in a spreadsheet, in a document somewhere. And I think that's one of the greatest value points. There's a lot of them, right? But a really good one is let's centralize all this data in one point so that if I'm on a test and I'm like, wait, who's the point of contact for this one? I know where to go. I don't have to go, which SharePoint was that? Which email? Which Jupyter notebook was it? You know what I mean? I like it having this all in one place, and already a great example of that.
Yeah, and we collect a lot of that data now. We'll give you the option of that. Probably by the time this airs, we're also going to have some great new features that allow you to define the types of data that you're collecting for those clients. Everybody likes to report on a little bit something different on their cover page, or secondary point of contact. All that data, really soon we'll have that all available for you. But I popped in here, Paul, into your empty client now. We take you straight to the reports section. Because once again, all about just getting the work done. We don't have any reports for you today, so we're just going to go ahead and create one. Really not a whole lot you've got to do to get started. So we'll call this the PSW report. We have this concept of templates in PlexTrac because at the end of the day, we want you driving people, your clients, your own work into the platform. It's a much better way of consuming data than getting a 300-page spreadsheet. But we understand that people do still want to be able to produce those documents. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But we give you the option of associating various report templates that you have so that it comes out, the final report, in your look and feel. There's additional metadata such as engagement methodology, things like the engagement types. These are all useful metadata points that you can add. However, we have other ways that you can add that metadata. Fields, once again, for your report description and details. You can assign your operators. Anyone who has permissions to a particular client can be assigned as an operator. So I'm going to assign Michael, and he's going to get a nice little email here momentarily. Start and end dates, things like that. Just workflow management stuff to keep track of your engagement, and then any additional logistical information and scope. One thing that you'll notice, so we have tags when we created the client. We have tags throughout the platform at all levels of data, and they're really helpful for a lot of reasons. Number one, it makes it really easy to find whatever your data is. You know, if I wanted to, if I was going to be performing a test on the PSW headquarters, LAN, I can create that tag, and then I can aggregate data from this report and any other reports that have this particular tag in our analytics section. Let's just get started at this point. Once we create a report, we have just a blank shell of a report at this point. No data been entered yet. There's really kind of two major areas in any given report. You have your report narratives, and then you have your report findings. We'll start out with the report findings because that's really where the rubber meets the road. So we hop in here. We have no findings at this point. There's three logical ways of bringing your data into PlexTrac from this view. Lots of other tools inside of PlexTrac feed into reports, but we'll just limit it to this manual portion right now. So the quickest way and the most useful way for saving time is to use your write-ups database. Every pen tester out there, Paul, I'm sure, did you have some sort of knowledge base of write-ups that you drew upon when you were doing pen testing?
Yeah, I had like a folder of all the reports that I did for clients, and it was in Word docs, and then I would scour through those, and I would copy and paste, right? I mean, we're talking 20 years ago or so.
Yeah. We don't want that.
Things haven't changed a whole lot since then, Paul, by the way.
No, that's why I was excited when you first showed me the product. I was like, oh, I totally get this particular problem and kind of solution and value statement, because I lived that. It literally was a folder like on one of my computers that like I protected with my life because it was all of your clients' findings, right? And I would just kind of go back through and go, oh, that one's kind of similar, copy and paste, and then update it. And of course, as we know, the other problem with that is I may do the second test, come up with some better findings and better methodology and better solutions that I wrote up. And then when you go client number 3, you're like, wait, where was the most recent write-up of that? And you're scouring through. The problem gets infinitely worse because if you've got a couple of dozen reports in there, where was my best write-up of that finding and that solution, right? And having this to be able to click and just add that in and keep it updated in one place, already huge win.
Yeah, and it really is easy. We ship PlexTrac with about 200 or 300 different, write-ups from authoritative sources like Burp or the Center for Internet Security. But really, the power of the write-ups database really comes when you make it your own. So I just selected a few here. As you add these various write-ups to your write-ups database, you can tag these things however you see fit. I'm not really sure how these are tagged at all in our demo, but it makes it really easy to find the write-ups you're looking for. One thing that we've added, I think, Paul, since the last time that we performed a demo for you, is that we now have the ability, and I'll come back to this report, to bring in all of your write-ups from the write-ups database in a simple CSV. So if you've got, in your case, Paul, it wouldn't help you a whole lot because everything's in a Word document. Yeah. But if you've got, a lot of organizations have a write-ups KB that they can export into a JSON or an XML or a CSV and very easily manipulate into a CSV. And then you can just pump all of your existing write-ups KB directly into PlexTrac and start using them immediately. So really great new feature that we've added. So with each one of these write-ups that I brought in from the write-ups database, I brought a local copy in. And so I can preview that. I can see, okay, here's the language, the narratives that I had before, the recommendations, the references. But I'm a good pen tester, and I'm not just going to give you a canned write-up. We're going to talk about what actually I saw in your environment. And so for each one of these, you can edit this data, come in here and modify and really tailor the reusable data, the narratives that you had saved into your write-up to really reflect the true state of what you saw in that particular environment. You can enrich it with either inline screenshots and code samples, or you can add those things discreetly simply by coming in here and dropping a. Probably should move that off the screen. Never know what's going to show up, but I'll throw it in here. So
there you go.
This is Jinja 2. Good for me. Good for you. I can associate my evidence with any assets that may have appeared here, but I can also do the same sort of thing in any one of my fields. One thing we've also done recently, Paul, is we've replaced our editor with a much more capable rich text editor, which allows me to do great things like provide those inline screenshots and code samples, things like that, and even automatically start adding captions to these.
Yeah, that interface is really slick. I mean, drawing on my development experience, implementing that is about finding the right library and getting it streamlined. That's really nice.
Yeah, it's been and kudos to all those great partners of ours who have helped us implement this and test it. Something new that we've added as well is we now have full table support, and so it's it's very functional for what you need it for. Pretty simple interface. You simply define what I'm looking for, but this is really useful for those things where you may want to put in tables of like subnets that were targets for a particular engagement, right? And you've got all your standard abilities. Additional things that we've added since I think the last time we've talked is we now have the ability of actually providing, colorized text and things like that. So the editor's really come a long way, and we're real happy with what we've been able to provide.
Yeah, no, I like it because it seems like the right amount of functionality. Because I mean, you go into Word or some of these other editors, and there's way more functionality than you'd ever use. This seems like it's really the right amount of features for doing the report, and having it in the product is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can save these things into your templates. And so even those few steps that I went through, once we don't limit you to things like what colors you can use. You can define whatever color you want via hex, things like that. I'm probably going to completely screw up my use of hex numbers here, but you kind of get the idea there.
Nice.
So really, we're really continuing to add capability. Excited about that. So it's not just though about the narratives that we found this vulnerability. Where did we find the vulnerability? And so our affected assets area is where you can either manually create assets that are associated with this client very easily. So if I was doing a web app test and I've got that, I can add additional pieces of metadata. One thing that clients really are really keen in on now is the ability to classify assets by their severity, because obviously, the same vulnerability that exists on my domain controller is going to be a little more important to me than the one that exists on a marketing laptop. So we're going to talk a little bit more about affected assets as we go along. But what's interesting to note is that affected assets exist as a separate data object. And so we're in a single report, Paul, and this finding WebSocket hijacking exists for this asset here. But what if I want to know about across all the different reports that we've done, all the vulnerabilities that exist on this asset? We've got the capability of displaying that too. We won't get squirreled there quite yet, but you get the idea. So that's baseline. We've got the ability as well to add custom fields. We offer you a lot of things you can report upon: description, recommendations, details, and the finding details. But everybody has a little something different. You may want to provide an impact statement, right? If you don't remediate this, what is the potential impact to your business organization? And so whatever those additional things that you like to report upon that are not in the baseline set of fields we provide, it's really easy to create those. And once you've created them, it's really easy to assign those as a template so that they're always there and available for you. So really flexible. Already demonstrated the Jinja Ninja here. You can also provide code samples as well, and we'll format those appropriately. But once again, you can do all of these things now today in the editor as well. So I used the construct of the write-ups database to show how you would bring in and edit a finding, but you can also start from scratch. You can just come in here and say, great, I went out there and I found this WebSocket hijacking as a vulnerability in the environment, and didn't just begin, populating all these same fields as you would as if you were editing previously. So those are two of the three ways, but oftentimes, even the hardcore pen testers often are going to be using a scan tool as part of that initial reconnaissance. Paul, did you use like Nessus or Burp or something like that?
Yeah, all of them, Nessus, Nmap, Burp, all those.
Perfect. So we support all of the major parsers right now that you might use in that recon phase. Or if you're a vulnerability management service provider, you're using those every day as part of your tool bag. It's in your bandolier of tools. So if I go to add findings and then from tools, and then I choose my parser, and you can see everything you could possibly use for the most part is here. Acunetics, Burp, things on the web app side, as well as your most popular network tools. So I'll grab something small here. NetSparker are often small. Grab a scan result here, and I'll import this, and we'll watch the magic happen here. I should have had this staged for you, Paul. But any questions from you, Paul, while I grab this file?
Yeah, it's funny. I could have given you some NetSparker results because we use NetSparker.
Well, and I think what's also important to note here as well is that this is all a REST-based API. So we do have a lot of customers that are writing their own import capabilities from the custom tools that they may have written for within their environment or that they use on engagements. So it's very flexible in that arena too.
Absolutely. So I found my file here, and we discussed tags, right, and how useful they can be. One of the neat things that we can do is if you're bringing in your findings from various sources and you want to keep track of where things came from, you want to differentiate between those findings that you did find through a tool versus what you may have manually created. I could just tag this with recon, right? And so now, once I submit this, and I tagged that at the finding level, I also could have tagged my assets. We went ahead and parsed that, and you can see now we've got a whole lot more of these. And if I really just want to see the ones that I just brought in, I can focus on that tag that I applied. And now I'm just seeing those various findings that we brought into the platform. NetSparker probably wasn't the best one because they don't have the best schema for their naming. But once again, I brought in this data. I brought in any raw scan data that the parser gave to me so that we can view that and export it as well, along with everything that came from the scan tool as far as default description recommendations. Just like with your write-ups, all that is completely editable. If you don't like what has been spit out as far as recommendations from your tool, you want to maybe polish that and make it unique for their environment, you can feel free to do that as well. You wanted to maybe even change this to plain text, you can do that as well. A new feature that we've added recently, Paul, that is that this raw scan data that comes from scanning tools, there's a lot of great information here, but if you try to export this into a document, I've seen 300-page reports turn into 13,000-page reports very quickly. But sometimes there is that thing that you want to provide. So we now provide you with the ability to toggle that on so that you can have that sort of data available when you export this report. And you can do that down to the finding level. So you don't get that 13,000-page report. For this particular finding, there was something useful here that we want to show. You now have that control. If you do want to turn it on for your entire report, we have that option for you as well. I wouldn't recommend it. But that's completely up to you.
But you can choose, like, is that a delete icon there?
Back in the affected assets?
Oh, no, actually in the previous screen.
Oh, okay.
Like if I import a bunch of stuff from NetSparker, but there's like a really low one there that I'm like, I don't want to report on that. You can just delete it, right? You can just bounce through those and delete them, right?
Absolutely. And you don't have to go into each one and delete one individually. We have a lot of actions that are available.
Yeah, nice.
I don't want my informationals.
Right.
So I just selected those, or I selected all. And then I say, you know what, get rid of those, Paul. I don't want them. So, and now they're gone.
Yeah, it's good. You can customize your baseline, basically. Bring in my results. Just give me the findings that I want, and then I'm going to focus on, how I exploited just those findings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one other thing to note that we'll just talk to, since in the interest of time, but you can actually program through the use of our parser actions where every time you bring in a scan, you can say, hey, I don't want to incorporate informationals, or I want to map this back to another write-up, or I want to consolidate these 10 findings from Nessus that say they're all related to SSL findings. I want to map those to a single finding from the write-ups database so that you don't have to do a lot of that post-processing manipulation
that was actually my next
of the
question.
scan results.
And SSL is a great example, right? Like, address your SSL issues. I know the scanners get like really in depth about all the SSL issues. You really that's a great example of, I want to consolidate them, and I want to write up like, here's the 3 things you need to do to address your SSL issues. Go do that. Here's all the raw data if you want it, but basically like go update your certificates, and that usually in that process will fix a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah, absolutely. In the interest of time, we won't give a full demo of this capability. If you just Google PlexTrac parser actions, however, we've got a great 7-minute video out there that will walk you through how to do exactly what you just described, Paul, there, where you are able to very easily determine how you want those linkages to occur. So really, and that's available for all of our scanners as well.
Nice.
So you get something like Scythe. I was talking.
And so sorry. So you can when you do these parser actions, it's not just severity, right? Because I do want the low severity ones, but I want to take classes of them that are SSL. I really don't care about the severity. Like, take the SSL ones, maybe in these 3 severities, classify them. But I want all the other lows and informationals, maybe, for this particular report, right? That's what the parser actions allow you to do.
Right, and it can be a 1-to-1 or a many-to-1 mapping. So, if I were to filter on SSL, and just as you said, Paul, you've been here before.
There you go.
I have 19 different findings, and they all have the same remediation action, right? Start using TLS 1.2 or greater, right?
Right.
So I don't think I've got anything, in my database, but you get the idea.
You'd have something in your database that was a finding on that in a write-up that you could apply to it. Yeah, that's perfect.
Exactly. That is exactly right. So, well, great. Well, let's go back to our client and kind of finish walking the dog through that report that we were working on. So I mentioned earlier, Paul, that we have 2 main sections of the report: the findings that we just walked through. But then we also have the report narrative. You're always going to have the executive summary, the methodology, the scope, the things like that you need to report upon. And if you're anything like I was, that doesn't change a whole lot for most of your reports, right? You're doing a little bit of tweaking once again for the environment, and that's great. So you can build all those things in PlexTrac, and you can do that manually, but that's not the better way of doing business. Another new feature we've added, Paul, is that you can bring in pre-built narratives from any of your report templates. So the demo gods didn't necessarily treat me well this morning, so I didn't have time to build all these out. And that one has no narratives in the field. But if I find one that does here, say like test, so you can see I've added that. And what has happened is I have brought in now the narrative test from that test template and test 2. So where this is really useful, we've got a lot of pen test clients. They do multi-scope engagements, right? So they come in and they're providing an external pen test, an internal pen test, maybe social engineering, a physical, maybe a segmentation test if it's a PCI client. But they don't want to have 900 different narrative sections in every single report and then just have to delete things. So you can now, it's like, okay, great. If I'm doing an internal test, I've got those narratives that are specific to that scope, and I can just bring those directly in, and I'm off to the races.
Nice.
So, yeah, lots of new stuff since we've talked, Paul. We should talk more often. So,
it's awesome.
But at the end of the day, at this point, you can see I've got my 4 total findings. I have, the test or the narratives that I had here, which aren't very pretty, but once again, this would be your pre-built executive summary, things like that. You can do inline graphics. So if you wanted to do something like the OWASP methodology graphic, that standard linear line that I'm sure you've seen before, that stuff can all be included in there as well. But now it's time to get this data to your client. The best way to get this data to your client is, just have them come in and go to, assign them as a user with limited permissions that they don't have the ability to modify any of your underlying data, and let them come in and let them see everything that exists, just doing a quick refresh here, everything that exists, and let them interact with things. Let them see the Ginger Ninja with their own eyes, because it's so much easier, especially with things like our tags and our keyword filter searches here, for them to find the data that they really need, than trying to wade through a 300-page report. And that's always going to be what we're going to tell people the best way to deliver your data is.
And I think also an important thing to clarify there too is just the enhanced collaboration that you can experience through the PlexTrac platform. Being able to communicate, whether you're an internal, assessment team and needing to communicate with other departments within your organization, or you're a consulting firm that you're exposing this to your customers. Really, the platform provides that glue to really stay close on the remediation lifecycle, which is at the end of the day what's most important.
And I'm sure this works different ways, but do you find that the pen testers have an instance of PlexTrac and grant the clients access to it? But what if the client has an instance of PlexTrac and they want that data in their system? I'm assuming you kind of pick and choose like which one you want to do, right?
Yeah, and the nice thing about our format, when you can export to a PlexTrac formatted report, which is a JSON file. So all those scenarios work really well. Where
Gotcha.
We have some enterprise customers where they just grant access to their consulting firms to come and write the report in their own instance, or if they both have instances of PlexTrac and neither wants to open it up to each other, you can still write it in PlexTrac, export it in that format, import it in, and you haven't had to do any copy and pasting or anything like that, and you've got the same experience that you would have in terms of managing the results.
Awesome.
Yeah. Simply just click this button and pick your JSON. And that's actually, Paul, how we work with our third-party pen testers that we hire for PlexTrac.
Right.
Is they use PlexTrac and they send it our way. So
sweet.
Dan brought up a point that I don't want to spend too much more time here because I know we want to talk about Runbooks. But the collaboration piece, right? If you are working in the same environment, we have the ability to do that collaboration. You can see here, I've got this instance hooked up with Jira. If you're a Jira user, you can push this into PlexTrac. But your users, the end consumers of the data, if they get this report and it's like, all right, we're going to start working on this thing, and now it's ready for a retest. We've assigned a sub status. This is something you can define, and that's gonna be assigned to demo. We can create this update, and we get this running log of all the actions that have been taken for remediation. Now, I did this at the finding level. What we can also do, and this is really handy in the vulnerability management space, if you've got, if you run a Nessus report and you've got 50 instances of this, and you need to keep track of the remediation discreetly for each host or affected asset, we allow you to provide those updates even down at the individual asset level as well. So it really provides a great punch list for the remediators, and the ability to interact with the status tracker, that is one of those permissions that we do allow those less permissioned accounts to have so that they can perform that collaboration with the testers.
Yeah, that's really awesome because tracking the remediation is the next phase, right? And that's super important. Absolutely.
So Paul, where I'd like to take us for the remaining time we have here. Actually, before we do leave here, I do want to make, I've talked about exporting several times. We use, custom word templates built in Jinja that we work with the client for every single one of our partners so that the export comes out in their existing look and feel. So I don't have, one for Paul Security Weekly already built up for us here today. So I'm just going to use the built-in default template that comes out of PlexTrac. So what this is going to look like is nothing like what will come out of any one of our clients' environments, because they're all using templates that we do the actual Jinja coding directly into the template, but it gives them a nice document in their existing look and feel with their brand. And you can see there's those two test sections we threw into the executive summary. But then we do all that tabulation of the data for you that you would want, right? To include, what's the status? Here's that one that we moved to in process. And these metrics are completely customizable. Jinja 2 is a very powerful language. If you want to report upon the total number of high severity findings that are specific to the internal portion of the web application test, we can do all that for you. And then we can format the findings themselves however it is that you want to see those findings. There's your Jinja Ninja that I added in line along with that table that we just did on the fly, right? So once again, this is just representative of one way that you can export. It's not like you go to the ice cream store and you pick, one of 10 different flavors. There is no right way that things look coming out of PlexTrac because it really is all about your look and feel. And how we get there is we start out with our partners. We take whatever their existing template is, and we simply just use that Jinja language to code in what we need to pull out of the document, do the tabulation, and get everything looking perfectly. So, at most, once you print out that document, you might have, 5 minutes of review for any polishing that you want to do, and you're off to the races.
Nice. It's awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about Runbooks. So before I get too deep into Runbooks, what are Runbooks? And Dan, you always do a better job of talking philosophically about what Runbooks are. You want to maybe take a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Runbooks really are the next iteration in terms of that workflow automation, right? We started with being able to write the report as efficiently and automated as possible, but now we want to also focus on how do we get the engagement executed, and what are the steps that we should take, and how do we make this a repeatable process? This is very valuable from both sides of the coin in terms of the people executing the test, but also the people that are managing the results and managing the teams that are responsible for their programs. So not only I, as a security director, do I want to see, hey, what are my findings, but what are the things that were working? What did you test that didn't succeed? From the exploitability perspective. So the Runbooks module is definitely geared towards providing standardized methodologies for your testing engagements, being able to facilitate those true purple team exercises where you can collaborate during the engagement and be able to kind of have that real-time view of things coming across the wire, and are you able to detect them? And then ultimately, having that perspective of trending over time of, hey, we've executed this entire engagement 10 times this year, and we continue to improve in terms of what procedures are succeeding versus failing.
Absolutely. That's a great, much better said than I could have, Dan. I'm much better at actually just punching the buttons and executing. So I've kind of stepped us through the process while Dan's been talking just about it initiating a Runbook. And really all I did was I pulled a set of procedures that we've defined for a particular objective off the shelf. And I have said, I would like to run these procedures for a particular client. And, in the interest of time, we won't go through the process of building it, but there's a couple different ways of doing that. If you just want to come in here and build out a list of plays that you want to run, you can do that. If you want to start at the MITRE tactic level and then filter down to your techniques and then choose procedures that are based just on those techniques, you can do that as well. But at the end of the day, and by the way, what we do also ship PlexTrac with, in addition to having MITRE TAC Enterprise built in, we also are leveraging the good work by the folks at Red Canary Atomic Red Team and their atomics. So the procedures that you see in this particular Runbook are in fact Red Canary atomics, and they're in the order that I want them. For each one of these procedures, we can initiate our actual execution phase and come in here and very, very in a methodical fashion, understand what our prerequisites are for performing this exploit. What are the tools we need? What files do we need for payload? Where do we get them? Things like that. But then for the actual execution steps down to the command line level, this is a very simple one. Here's the thing that a tester needs to do. And as I think as Dan alluded to, for junior testers, this is the key. Yep. This is, I can't go wrong. They told me where to get what I need and what I need to type, right? And then based upon what happened here, did this exploit detonate or not? I can make a determination here. Was it successful? Was it not successful? The evidence that I collect throughout this, I can come through here. Paul, you probably were one of those folks that collected 10 times as much evidence. I'll even just use a NetSparker file because I can, as you probably used. This gives you the ability to collect all of your evidence while you're actually, I'm going to move this off because I'm going to grab an image here. all of your evidence while you're actually in the process of performing the assessment, and decide, either now that I do want to include this because it's such a cool picture of a ninja, or make that determination later. So now I've got these two pieces of evidence here, and if I later decide that I want to include that Sparker XML, I can do that. If I've got 100 screenshots here and I'm not sure which ones I actually want to keep, I can go to my gallery view and I can cycle through them. Obviously, my XML is not going to show me anything interesting here, but really very quickly use this to triage what you want to keep.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell you guys have done this and talk with people that have done it too, right? Because anytime you're executing something like from a runbook, like you're saying, you're screenshotting, especially junior testers, right? Screenshotting everything, and then you go back and you're like, wait, out of these 10 screenshots, I need just 3 of them to really show the impact, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're obviously taking these actions on an objective, right? And so you can either create that, or if this client already has some assets. So we did this for you, Paul, and if you recall, I think we created that, Acme client for you before, or asset. So for a client where they've already got assets built, it's really easy to just come in here. If I had more than one, I could have picked multiple. We only built one asset for you, but it makes it really easy to identify those assets that I've targeted. If this one was one where the detonation was successful, just like with affected assets, I can triage right here. I don't necessarily need to talk about the 90 assets that the defenses prevented detonation on. I need to talk about the one that did not, right? And if I've got any additional evidence that I want to add, things that I want to, narratives, things like that I want to add specific for that piece of that asset, I can do that as well. We've also got the ability for our blue team to get engaged. We are the purple team people, right? We believe that the best knowledge transfer happens when at the same time the red team is executing this, that you've got someone there that's really focused on our ability to detect this attack. And so much like the blue team can make a determination on what the overall success of the exploit was, we can make the determination on the blue team, was this detected and blocked, detected and alerted? We didn't get it in real time, but upon further examination, there's evidence there. We just got to tune our sensors and get things in place so the next time we actually do detect and block this thing. They can add their own attachments, things like that. I totally skipped over the procedure log on the red team, but they've got this as well. But this is really where you can give your time-stamped narratives, right? I did this at this time. Maybe this particular attack was detected, by my snort rule, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. And what's really cool is the red team, their procedure logs become collated with the blue team's procedure logs at the end of the day. I can assign operators to this particular, so people demo. So, hey, this one, Brandon's on the red team, Michael's on the blue team, and everyone knows, I got that backwards, but that's okay. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do, especially when you get into those larger engagements where you've got like 100 procedures. I may determine that there's nothing here to talk about. As far as finding, there was no vulnerability. The defenses were great, and I don't want to include this as a finding in my final report of vulnerabilities, but maybe I do. Maybe I didn't actually get to execute all 5 execution steps because the blue team stopped me. So even though I haven't finished all my steps, I can still mark this as completed. Okay.
Yeah, that my question was, I think the runbook thing is awesome, by the way, and for purple teaming, there's no better tool for collaboration and documenting what's happening. I think you guys put a lot of thought into there, and if you're doing purple teaming, I had never seen that feature presented in that way. That's awesome. How does that tie into reporting? Like once the runbook has been executed, the red team and the blue team have collaborated, and then you cut this into a report. Is that the button up there? Sorry, I can't.
That is, Paul.
My glasses are for reading what's close to me, and that screen's far away. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So for this particular runbook engagement, we've only done one, and that's fine. But whenever you're done and you're ready to submit this, you just click the submit engagement. And what happens is all of these procedures get put into that same report data structure that we went over in the first portion of our demonstration here. Now, remember, we only marked one of those procedures as something that we wanted to include as a finding. And so you can see it here. And if I were to preview it here, we get all the data. There's our Jinja Ninja. that we added. We've tucked away that XML into our artifacts section. Here's that procedure log entry by the blue team. There's our asset. And we didn't add any evidence, but if we had, that would be here in the scan output. So you have all of the evidence for this finding. But, Paul, that's a great story. Here's what the things you got to go fix. But, it doesn't really tell the full story of the engagement. If you really had gone through and you had fully tested all 10 of those procedures, but really there was only a vulnerability in one, if you just deliver a report that only talks about that, you're not necessarily demonstrating your value of everything that you tested exhaustively to the client. So brand new to PlexTrac, I know you haven't seen this yet, Paul, is that for those folks who have created a report from a runbook, we now have the report procedures area. So if I click into the report procedures, now what I have is each one of those procedures that we executed during the runbook, we've got the ability, even if there was no vulnerability found, and obviously we didn't add data to any of these, but to come in to review the procedure that was executed, to view the data that we collected. This would probably be, attack failed because it wasn't a finding, right? And any of that other data. So it really does a much better job. And by the way, you can edit this as well. If you actually realize that, we did determine that this was a failed attack, we can do that. Just like everything else, you can edit it later. But we're really happy about this because it's a good news story if you go into an environment and you're a good pen tester and you don't find the kitchen sink full of vulnerabilities, but you still need to demonstrate value. You still need to let your client know what was tested, because if they hire you or a different company 6 months later, you don't want them testing the exact same things. So this provides the record of all the things that were exhaustively tested.
That's awesome. It's a great way to track and report activities for red, blue, purple, right? Having it all come together and tracking those activities is perfect.
And the nice thing is that this ties back to the MITRE tactics and techniques, if you would like it to.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sean, let's dive into analytics real quick. I mean, because now that you've got all of this data into the platform, what can you do with it? And what, if I'm a CISO or if I'm a security director, I'd like to be able to kind of get a bird's eye view of where we're at, in terms of of our overall progress and security posture.
Yeah. How are we doing, Sean? I'm the CISO of Security Weekly, right? How are we doing?
Well, tell you what we'll do, Paul, is I'm going to real quick throw a tag on here just to make sure that I don't stumble over myself when I demo this. So I'm going to just tag this with Paul is cool, right? That is my enclave that I'm working on today. So now I have all these findings. The other thing, by the way, you may have noticed an orange tint to these. These are all in draft status, which means for our analytics purposes, they wouldn't be yet considered an analytics. So I want to bring these out of draft status. And I was trying to talk and I slid my slider the wrong direction there. So we leave those in published status. And now these will be addressed in the analytics. So our analytics module, we've got a number of different subsections there, but generally most people find the most value in the findings area. So we have a series of filters on the right. And so right now what I'm seeing is a number of different analytics for all of the data that I have access to. So if you provision PlexTrac access to your clients, they're not going to come in here and see analytics on all of the data. They're only going to see the things that they should be seeing. But let's just, hey, I want to find things that are in Paul's Security Weekly environment. So I'm going to go and I'm going to look for that Paul is cool tag. And I can now filter down and I can see that for, everything in the Paul is cool environment, I've got a total of 4 findings, a lot of data in this demo. We're always throwing things at it. And here's the status. Most of these are open. I've got one that's in process. Remember earlier on, we changed to that status. And here's the breakdown. And you see this is a breakdown by client. This is actually pretty interesting because if you had multiple clients that had the same tag, you would see those broken down by those different clients. And even if your end user is only a single organization, oftentimes for our service providers, they'll break down things into headquarters LAN, wireless, things like that, so that people can get that more discrete look at their data. But I've shown you numerous places throughout the platform where you can apply tags. I just did it at the finding level, but we could have done that at the client level. We could just sort and filter our analytics based upon the client name. We can add additional filters based upon severity. We could filter just based upon particular reports or tags that are applied to reports, or even just temporally through, based upon when findings were created. Once you've applied your various filters, you get down here and, I've got this one-stop shop. Here are the most critical issues, the things that, to answer your question, Paul, I'm the CISO. What should I be worried about? Well, it's really easy. I decide what is it that I should be worried about where, right? Well, in this environment, in Paul's environment, here's the things that should be keeping me up at night and that I need to have Johnny working on to ensure remediation.
That's really awesome.
We have additional analytics as well. If you wanted to take a look at trends, the data here is probably going to look kind of wonky, but that's all right. I call this our winning and losing chart. This is a demo environment. We never close anything, right? We're always just creating lots of new findings. But this red line here demonstrates the number of vulnerabilities that have been opened over time. The green line shows the number that have been closed. And what I always tell our partners is, if your red line is consistently above your green line, you're losing. You're adding additional security debt, and you need to take a look at how you're doing business, because you're digging yourself into a deeper hole.
Yeah, analyzing vulnerability data and thinking about that a lot across my career, just seeing some consistency in that graph, I think is what I'd be looking for, right? Because I know new findings are going to come out, and I know it's going to take some time to fix them. It's a constant battle, right? I don't want to see spikes in either direction. I actually don't want to see there not being any findings being found. Correct. And I don't want to see everything always being all fixed at once. Those are red flags. I feel like there should always be, some ebbs and flows to that graph, and having a consistent ebb and flow is what, as a CISO, I'd be looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the last thing I want to touch upon, Paul, is, you mentioned about fixing things. Not all findings are created equal, right? And so most organizations have benchmarks that they've established in their environment for mean time to remediation. And so, based upon those findings that have been closed, and this is horrible. Obviously, you don't want to be waiting 3 months to remediate your criticals here, but you get this automated look at your mean time to remediation based upon the severity of an individual finding. So really helpful. Awesome.
It's great stuff. It really does get the real work done and automate so many things in the whole process. And that's what I love about it. Having done I almost feel people should do this entire process manually to appreciate. They're almost spoiled. Using this is the way I would feel about it, because there's a lot of moving pieces, and having a solution to help. I like to say, help automate the workflow, right? Not necessarily because automation, as we've established, can have some negative connotation, but you're really improving and helping the efficiency in the workflow of these processes of discovering vulnerabilities, exposures, however you want to term it, and getting to that remediation step. And all of those processes in between, super complex. Having this tool, makes it possible to do that on a consistent basis. Again, going back to that result at the end, I want to see a nice ebb and flow of what's being discovered and what's being fixed. And I want to constantly see things being discovered and constantly see things being fixed, realizing that, there's going to be gaps, but that's okay as long as there's consistency in the work is getting done, right? That's what I'm looking for.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and I think we've also found that people have a higher morale on engineering teams and pen testing teams, because they are able to stay focused on the stuff that they enjoy doing, is finding and fixing the issues, and not getting caught up in the manual processes and friction that's involved in those.
Absolutely. Well, that's great stuff. For folks that want to learn more, you can visit the PlexTrac website. Again, I come back to, if you're a pen test team, there's really no reason not to have this tool. If you're writing reports and you have findings, this solves so many issues for you and helps improve your workflow. And then, for blue teams and enterprises, having a central place to track all this activity to me is super important, because one of my pet peeves, you can ask anyone that's worked with me over the years, is just having the process and the information spread out across email and spreadsheets and Slack and all that stuff. I like to have a central place to manage the process, but also manage the data. And PlexTrac accomplishes that across the board for remediation and discovery of vulnerabilities and pen testing. So great job.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, that will conclude the demo today. Again, I encourage folks to visit PlexTrac. You saw a very in-depth demo today, so they should be ready to go. Oh yeah, I want that. So go do that. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care, Paul.